Hello and welcome to the Nation Week. This week, you are joining me, Elane, Noor, Abdullah, as we pick up on stories trending during the week to discuss with our esteemed panelists. Joining me for a chat this week are EIZAZ AZHAR, Managing Director, 7W Associates. I also have DATUK KUMARARAJAH, as well as NORDIN Abdullah, joining me on the panel this week. Hello, welcome, guys. I've got a fantastic panel this week.
Always a pleasure, Nick.
It's fantastic. And we have quite a lot of stories to cover this week. It's been an exciting week all around. There are new announcements, there's exciting developments. 1st of May, lots of new things have been announced. So let's go to the obvious question. So essentially, the new SOP relaxation. And later I'll cover a little bit about Elon Musk, who of course bought Twitter. And the minimum wage from the 1st of May as well. But let me just give a little bit of background here. The new SOP relaxation, Malaysia is looking to take a giant step forward with COVID-19 endemicity, with, of course, a new raft of rules. Face masks no longer a must when outdoors. Registering with the MYSEJAHTERA app not needed. Social distancing also not required. Khairijah Malaysia announced that face masks can come off when people are outside their houses, offices, or when they're at a park or bus stop from the 1st of May. So that's a huge development there. The relaxation of the mask off outdoors has gained some positive feedback from the public, but most still want to continue wearing one, including when outdoors. And this lands the responsibility back on our individual labs to look out for one another. Let's get your opinions on this development. EIZAZ, you're on my left, so you first here.
All right, so it's such a pleasure to be back. Thank you so much, Elane. So with everything that's been done, right, I think the big issue about how these things are being put out is always about communication, right? And I remember when the SOPs first came out, there was a lot of confusion. There were a lot of things were not really communicated that well. But in this event, we're actually relaxing some of those rules. So I think it will be much easier for people to come back to a sense of normalcy all over again. Maybe one thing to look at is what are the cultural aspects of what's been happening over the past 2 years, and will those still be carried over? For example, wearing masks. I'm still going to wear a mask. I think a lot of people are still going to do that. There's still going to be some element of social distancing. The salam thing, it might never come back, actually, right? Yeah.
Perhaps.
But yes, it is good to see, especially for the traveling rules, people coming back into the country. So that is very, very heartening to see.
Yes, I think that we're on a very positive track. Nordin, you want to have your views on this?
Well, I think of it from a point of mental health. And for me, I'm seeing that people returning back to as much normalcy as possible will actually help with people's mental health and that kind of thing. So that's what I hope to see. I know that the numbers in terms of COVID-19 have come down dramatically. We've seen, numbers shoot up again. I still remember we were in single digits, and then all of a sudden we're in the thousands. So it's not by no means over. And I think the simple defense. Masks. I've got a lovely pink one today. Pink mask, black mask, whatever color you choose, they're still very useful. And I think social distancing and what was said earlier about culture, there needs to be a culture of social distancing and in terms of just good human conduct.
Yeah, and I think I've heard of friends saying that, oh no, what am I going to do with the tons of masks that I've purchased in my house? I could have a huge stockpile. I think some people are just going a little bit berserk on that. AT, what are your thoughts on this, AT?
Yeah, I think it's very
we're not getting a good clear line from you, so I think we're going to sort of we're having patchy problems with AT today.
It's turned into R2D2, Elane. He's always been clever.
With the relaxed SOPs, we can finally get into the studio again, I suppose.
Yes, that's one of the positive things that we're looking forward to. So with the relaxation of SOPs, hopefully we'll be able to kickstart and get this conversation going in the studio. So AT is going to step off for a bit and try to get back in. But let's move on to the next story. When AT comes back, maybe he has some comments on the relaxation of SOPs and whether or not he's got a stockpile of masks that he's got to get rid of. But EIZAZ, I want to hear what you have on the story of Elon Musk. So I want to bring this up because, of course, prior to that, everybody's talking about Musk purchasing Twitter. He finally has purchased Twitter. And of course, this comes after the company finds itself treading a narrow path between enabling speech and policing dangerous content ranging from, misinformation to harassment to posts inciting violence or political unrest. And he himself is a self-described free speech absolutist, leading to speculation about what changes he would bring as a now private owner of the company, which had previously been a public company held by shareholders. So what would Musk's taking over Twitter mean for the platform? EIZAZ, let's hear from you first.
So first of all, let's talk about Elon Musk a bit. If we haven't realized, to put this into perspective, Elon Musk is worth about 250 billion USD. That's about like 1 point something trillion ringgit. As a matter of perspective, the Malaysian GDP in 2020 was about 300 billion USD. And so you've got this guy who's literally worth maybe 80% of the Malaysian GDP, right? And he goes over, he buys a company that's obviously public. And I suppose, apart from the stuff and changes he's definitely going to make to what it is, I'd like to look at the underlying fact of it. If you have that much resources, right? Are we really going through might is right? If I have that much things at my disposal, is it really a green card for me to go ahead and do pretty much anything I want, right? I think that's capitalism for you. We've seen this done many times, but maybe not on a scale of this intense, like a one-shot transaction of 47 billion USD. I think that's unheard of from an individual. Right.
It's 44 billion. I think that was the last that was reported. But I think a lot of people are worried that all that supposed power in the hands of one single person, how is that going to shift for him to do anything that he wants, because he now is the owner of the platform, like it or not. Now, Noordin, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think while he owns it, he doesn't regulate it all completely. And I think what we've seen in Australia and in Europe, I was watching the European Union talk about this last night as well, that they are actually going to say, look, within the jurisdiction of the European Union, you can't have hate speech, you can't have, child pornography and all this kind of thing. So there will still be, he's still moving into a regulated space. There's still going to be a need for him to follow regulations. And of course, China is by far one of the hardest regulatory spaces for him to deal with. Having said that, Malaysia themselves, Tan Sri Anwar, the minister a few days ago, said that Malaysia is going to look at the MCMC Act in terms of the content that is out there on the various platforms. He didn't mention Twitter, but what he was saying is that we need to understand how to regulate this better. And I think this is a global trend. As countries, governments look to, not to say control free speech, but actually to deal with some of the fake news, the misinformation. COVID-19 has been a pandemic of misinformation more than the health. So, we are faced with a lot of change in this industry vertical at the moment.
Yeah, and I think I was reading some reports with regards to this as well, but I think a lot of people say that, he'll find that it's not as easy as, absolute freedom. It's not as easy to, just because there are still policies and there's still regulations, there's still governments that are able to sort of, manage this space. And absolute freedom of speech in what he's proposing, absolutist, is only allowed if you are responsible for what you're communicating. So if you're not responsible for what you're communicating, absolute freedom is not going to generate, any kind of a healthy space for us to be able to interact in. So I think those are questions that people are trying to see whether or not Musk is going to push Twitter in that direction. But we still don't have anything back, which means we'll still go to the next story. Malaysia is to start the 1,500 minimum wage from the 1st of May. 1st of May is like a big date, right? Labor Day, 1st of May, everything sort of just rolls out. 1,500 minimum wage, doors are open, borders are open, masks off, outdoors, SOP relaxation all throughout. People are, like you said earlier, Noordin, getting back into the groove of some kind of normalcy. What are your thoughts with regards to minimum wage? Noordin, let's start with you.
I think it's an imperative move. Malaysia needs to move away from being a low-cost provider of labor to a provider of high-quality productivity, and that's only going to happen when the wage equation changes. The challenge is going to be for those people now receiving those higher wages to pick up their game and deliver for their employer. Because now the employer can actually say, hey, you're getting this now, you need to look at your productivity levels. So it's all going to be about productivity. Actually, wages are the outcome of productivity. They are not the thing that you put first. So when you start to think along those lines, you'll make better informed decisions. But I think it's an important step for Malaysia to draw a new bottom line in this discussion. And I'm excited to see what Dato has to say, because he's at the cold face of this issue. So I'm excited to see that.
AT, I'm hoping that we got you back on the line. Can you hear us and comment on the minimum wage to be rolled out on the 1st of May? I think we're still having troubles with AT. EIZAZ, your thoughts?
I would like to second some of Noordin's thoughts on that, right? It is really up to the employees or these individuals to provide additional productivity, but there's also a second part to it, right? What is a productive valued at, right? And like Noordin said, I think I totally agree with you. We have to move into more higher value spaces, right? I think when we chart the process of Malaysia, we went from an agricultural nation to an industrial nation. And then what happened halfway, we tried to make this jump to services, to high value services. That jump didn't really work out so well, because what happened, we dropped manufacturing straight away, tried to go to services, and then realized, hey, there's still a lot more value to be done in manufacturing. Went back here, and we are kind of stuck in the middle, right? A country that did something like that very well is often Singapore, right? Higher services, a lot of non-physical aspects of things. But coming back to the minimum wage part, great for the employees. I would like to see how the employers are going to deal with it, because not everybody is able to afford this jump immediately. That's number one. Number two, let's say the minimum wage isn't compliant, right? What are the enforcement actions in order to bring this back? But more than enforcement, we really have to take a look at the entire ecosystem as a whole. Travel is coming back, SOPs are being relaxed, right? And what sort of higher value output that these people can generate. A good example is in tech. Everybody's going into tech now. You are not going to believe what developers are being paid these days. I saw an ad in Singapore for Twitter, a developer for Twitter, and they were paying like 35,000 Sing a month, right? And they don't care about your experience. Can you do the work? And so that's the sort of level of productivity that we are looking at, moving towards. And I think the ecosystem has to adapt to it as well.
And it's not going to be a 9-to-5 job either. Sorry, and it's not going to be. I mean, that's the other thing people need to realize is, if you can't get that kind of money, if you want to get that kind of money, you've got to put in the hard work. You've got to put in the hours, and it's going to be it's a globally competitive world that we're living in right now. Malaysia is not just competing domestically; we're competing globally for foreign investment.
No, at the end of the day, we all come back to productivity, which is also, the topic of meritocracy, right? So you are paid what you're worth, of your value, what you've put in. So it must equate to that. And at the end of the day, there's also the question of when we have this minimum wage, it's going to impact the economy as well. Are things going to rise up in terms of cost? Because, across the board, it may not seem like a lot, but small little increments here and there gets translated into your everyday small inflations. A bag of sugar going up 10 cents, your individual drink goes up 10 cents too, So you won't see a direct correlation that makes sense, but it will have impact as well. So the extra that you make as a minimum wage, does that go a long way to those who are gaining this little bit of like 100 or 200 or 300 extra that they're getting for the minimum wage, and how that's going to impact the improvement of their lives or their basic living standards. So those are questions that we'll see along the way. But like I said, I don't think we have AT on this, so we will go on to the next story. EIZAZ, you have some topics that you'd like to highlight today. Ukraine, that's still happening.
Yes, Ukraine is still happening, and about three and a half months in, and it is still going, sadly, very, very strong. And it looks like Russia did not achieve its objective, right? They wanted to make it a very swift one, a very quick one, and now it's been 3 months and a bunch of sanctions forward. I think the question in everybody's mind is, number one, how long will this last? Number two, how worse can it get? But in the immediate time, can EU survive? Can the world cope without Russian oil, the second largest producer of oil in the world, right? So the winter's coming soon. Heating bills are going to start coming up, right? And the sanctions have started in Russia. A lot of companies, a lot of countries are unable to buy gas and buy oil. However, there seems to be a bit of a loophole there. So most of this oil is coming from a company called Gazprom, Russia's major national oil company, right? There's another company that's called Gazprom Bank. So Gazprom Bank is actually based in Switzerland. It is a bank that's owned by them. It's not under the sanctions list. And some of the countries have resorted to buying gas in euro, which Gazprom Bank will convert to rubles to boost up the economy. Germany has done it. Austria has done it. A lot of these EU countries that are reliant on fuel from them are actually doing it. So as a result, we can see the oil chart has hit an all-time high. I think it's about $100 right now. Wheat futures are also have at all-time high, right? And I guess what's on everyone's mind is this World War III? So I see some comparisons being drawn, how is it going to be turned into this huge thing? And I like to say that the situation back in the 40s was quite different, because you had something what's called the Axis powers. You had Germany, Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and you had Imperial Japan, right? In this case, it's just Russia alone. So if they decide to turn it into something that's global, I don't think they're going to get a lot of support from the international community. Back in the day, you probably could, but now there's just too much economic variables at risk.
Noordin.
Well, the interconnectivity of the global economy is immense right now. So when you start to unwind that, and you're starting to see, there was a very interesting simulation done on currency wars and who would win a global currency war. And actually the winner would be China, because they've just got the most currency. So whether or not, I think what we're looking at is we're looking at the weaponization of everything. And we're looking at mass, we're not looking at, there's this concept of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, around the nuclear war strategy. Now you're seeing mass events of disruption. So now when Russia starts to play the game, because we're seeing that the flip side of it now, they just turned off the gas to Poland. And it's not that we're not going to, not that we don't have the money, or we're under sanctions, to say, hey, you just can't get the resource that you need. So now they're weaponizing the resources that they have at hand. And the moment they cut off all the port cities in Ukraine, we're talking about the control of wheat, and that is going to push people into hunger. Hunger leads to poverty. Poverty leads to revolution. And we saw what happened with the Arab Spring, which was kicked off by food-based inflation. And that is really the threat right now. So while we look like we are hitting Russia with sanctions, they've started to turn that sword around and face it back towards some of the smaller countries in Europe, and it's obviously a test run for greater things to come if they don't get their way.
Let's talk about that, because that's the topic that you wanted to raise with regards to food-based inflation as well, Noordin.
Well, exactly. And one of the things that we're seeing, in the last 24 hours, especially in Malaysia, is a discussion around chicken. And of course, there's a big discussion going on. There's also a very interesting investigation going on from MYSEJAHTERA, the Malaysian Competition Commission, into the entire, looking at the supply chain of chicken, and is there any cartels there? So I'm interested to see that investigation come to fruition, because it's about it's about opening the market to ensure that other forces within the market don't control these prices of chicken artificially. I think it's very important in terms of controlling food-based inflation, knowing that the global situation is so critical, that if you don't control your own domestic supplies, if you don't control your own domestic production, and that just doesn't mean being able to produce it, it's also to be able to regulate it and produce it sustainably on an ongoing basis in all conditions, then that is the new bellwether for the government to achieve. And I'm excited to see that, because if we can achieve that, it will be a benchmark for not just Malaysia, but for the region.
Is there any comments with regard to that? place inflation and with regards to the impact that the war is having on the food security as a whole.
So interesting that you mentioned chicken, right? So I used to have some experience within that particular segment of stuff, and it is actually, the chicken industry is actually very opaque when it comes to food distribution, right? In food distribution networks, these are very, very long, drawn out distribution, very complicated arrangements that these companies have, right? For short of a better word, a cartel of stuff. I would like to equate this with LIBOR, right? The London Interbank borrowing rate, overnight borrowing rate, where all the banks come together at about 8:30 a.m. in the morning and set the, they literally set the rate for people that they have to lend at. So that, I don't think that is something that you can avoid. And to disrupt these distribution networks, right? You either have to come with something that's more efficient, right? Gives better value. And the moment that something happens here, business comes into play and you either get forced out or you get bought over. So it's a very, very complicated arrangement. The only way this can be solved is you really have to sit down with all the major distribution guys, right? Say, hey, this needs to be done. We foresee, for example, a huge spike in chicken feed. It's by week, it comes from Russia, it comes from all over the place. And this is what we're faced with, right? We have to come to sort of an uneasy agreement of sorts, but that is my understanding of how we're going to move forward with this. To completely get rid of it is not possible, but we are able to make some changes to the parameters on how we operate. I think that's for sure.
Okay. This definitely brings us to the other important topic. I think we've spoken about this before, but it's rearing its head over and over again, Noor, critical value chains, because the logistics of everything really affects so much of our daily lives. We don't realize it. It's just small things, but the ripple effects. We're so interconnected, we cannot extricate ourselves from how connected we are. Noordin.
Well, this is one thing that I think is a strategy approach for Malaysia moving forward. If we can start to look at what critical value chains, global critical value chains that we want to be a part of, whether it's in the food sector, whether it's in the mineral sector, and see how we become more and more efficient in those critical value chains. So whether or not we say to people, look, come and invest here because we've got the natural resource already. The example is palm oil. We've got the energy equation right. We've got the labor equation right. When you start to get those equations right, then you will start to attract those people in those companies to come into Malaysia that then can say, look, we now want to invest in Malaysia because you're able to help us get into the global markets. And what does that mean? Is that distribution equation where Malaysia has access to the Pacific Ocean, has access to the Indian Ocean, and with rail throughout mainland Asia. So this is starting to be more and more critical when we saw what happened with the Suez Canal. We see what's happening with what Russia is doing to Ukraine, where they're actually strangling supply routes. And those critical supply chains now become threats to business. If you can't control that threat and you can't deal with that crisis, you are either going to lose a lot of money or just completely go out of business. So on the flip side of that, it's the opportunity for Malaysia to get it right. When Malaysia gets it right, you get the investment. And I think that's the sweet spot we've got to start to look for.
Is there any comment on this?
So here's what's interesting, right? A brief look into the history of Malaysia. Malaysia has actually one of the longest, and most established trade routes that exist in the world today. Right? We've been around since the 1100s, and we've been such a very, very important, a piece of machinery within the global supply chain all the way back then. These are very established routes that we had for many, many years. The relationships we had with countries for many years. I think we should really go back to the root of it all, right, and rebuild some of those things all over again. For example, back in the 80s, right? A lot of things in Hong Kong, right? The ports, the shipping industries, a lot of Malaysians actually had their hand in doing that, right? And by doing so, establishing shipping lines, establishing global supply chains. So those are things that we might not want to forget, that we actually have been there. We actually have done that. So coming back to Noordin's point, actually, a bit of governance would do us a lot of good here to establish a trust for people to come in. When I enter, let's say, Malaysia, right? The first thing is how do I protect my investment, right? Number two is how do I exit if I choose to do so, right? And number three, is there still going to be that opportunity within the next couple of years? So those are things that we want to look at, and governance really is the backbone of all of it, if you ask me. Not only over just the main shipping line itself, but more critically, the distribution network that goes to all the consumers. And that's where the upside is actually being made. The shipping upside isn't that much. The margins are very, very thin. The real margins are made in distribution networks and capturing those. So we have to look into that, I suppose.
Now we're coming to a close for this week. Any final messages? We're going into Hari Raya next week. Everybody's sort of like having an exodus. Everybody's preparing for celebrations. Any message to the viewers out there? Noordin, let's start with you, and then we'll close with EIZAZ.
Of course, I have to say Selamat Hari Raya kepada semua orang Malaysia dan kaum Islam. So and really, one of my things that every raya that just breaks my heart is people who travel when they're tired and get stuck in accidents and stuff like that. So really just avoid being tired, make good decisions, and stay safe on the roads.
EIZAZ.
Well, very, very Selamat Hari Raya. And the more important part to me has always been the Maaf Zahir Batin part. We like to celebrate Hari Raya, but the emphasis should really be put on the Maaf Zahir Batin. It is, a time for forgiveness, for us to forgive, and for us to ask for forgiveness as well, right? And I hope that there's a lot to ask for over the past couple of years. And I hope that we can all come back together with our families, drive safe, stay safe, right? And as another unrelated note, Noordin, you actually look like Liam Neeson, so that's where I got it from, right?
and I love it all. That this is finally the year that everybody seems to be able to get together, because we've been in multiple MCOs and lockdowns. A lot of people have not been able to meet up with family and friends in the last 2 rayas since COVID happened in 2020. So, like you both mentioned, please travel safe. Don't waste this opportunity by trying to rush, be tired, and not be able to get home safe. It's all about keeping each other safe. Thank you both, EIZAZ as well as Noordin. Selamat Hari Raya to you both as well, and to all our viewers out there. Selamat Hari Raya, Maaf Zahir dan Batin from all of us here at Bernama TV as well. As we move into the final few days before Hari Raya commences, please travel safe. Follow advisories to reach your destinations to celebrate with your family and friends. Thanks for staying till the end of the segment with me, Elane, Noor, Abdullah. Bye for now.